All right, Stephen, thanks so much for being a guest on the Holistic Hub podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you today. How are you?
Hey Stephanie, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we made it happen.
I know. I'm so happy we did. Well, I'm really excited to chat about leaky gut and histamine intolerance today. But before we get started, I know that your journey started with dealing with like your own gut issues that ultimately led you to starting to diving into the world of like functional medicine and then ultimately starting your company. So I'd love to just hear a little bit of your background.
Yeah, mine's I think similar to yours and many people's is the wounded healer journey. I've had issues since birth, and I was grew up in the antibiotics for everything age, and so I was by the time I was in college, I was nicknamed the gas man from my family. Like my whole family, as you can might imagine, has a family history of IBS. So it's not like I'm weird compared to them, but I'm the smelliest of of my extended family. And even then, somehow it didn't dawn on me to maybe go get checked out. It was only after college, after a lot of stress and too much beer and pizza, things like that, where I was in a job. It was my dream job at the time, and I was working on the 16th floor of a high rise in Chicago. And there was only one bathroom on every level of that high rise. And so sometimes it's occupied, sometimes you can't get there in time. And my boss was like, hey, you're the smelly guy in the office. If you want to keep working here, your coworkers and I need you to get this figured out. And so that was a big wake up call for me at like 22, 23. This was 2008. And the internet was not what it is, but I did go seek help, and there was some helpful people in modern medicine and some unhelpful people. And essentially they just said, look, you have a family history of IBS. You can have any antibiotic you want. You can have all the Metamucil you need. You should eat whole grains, and you should just suck it up and stop complaining. And I was already feeling a version of IBS called visceral hypersensitivity. This is where, like, if you're not familiar, it feels like knives in your gut whenever you get really bloated. And so I was already kind of softly crying and farting every day, no matter what I ate. It didn't matter if it was chicken and salad, because I was actually overweight at the time. I had acne. I was having panic attacks. I was having major depressive episodes. I had exercise-induced asthma at the time. I didn't tell them all that stuff because I didn't even know you should talk about that stuff, and they didn't do a very good job of intake at the time to reveal that. But it was all related, obviously. And so after I missed a date because I was stuck on the toilet, I called my buddy from college who had celiac disease, and he was like, go on this diet, the specific carbohydrate diet. It's what you need to do. And so I dragged my feet for weeks, and then finally I did it. And within 7 days, probably 50% of my gas pains were gone. And it really flipped a light switch inside of me. It really gave me a place to put all that rage and anger and embarrassment and ashamedness and take back my power. And I realized that my college training, which was in electrical engineering, could be applied to the body. And if I was just willing to experiment and reverse engineer, find people who had suffered like me and find out what they did, try it, I could figure this out for myself. And so that launched this, what has now become over 15 years of online journaling about my own health. I went to the Kalish Institute for Functional Medicine. I've been blogging, researching, writing, creating programs throughout this whole time. And over the years, after we closed down our telehealth clinic, what I realized in that time frame was that there's a lot of great supplement companies, but they would make marketing claims that I would fall for, even me, and then I would try them in 20 or 30 individuals, and that it just wouldn't work. The curcumin, the special new curcumin, wouldn't work any different than the regular one we had been using. The special new glutathione would be worse than the other ones, and it put a little thing in the back of my head that has been there for a while. And so 5 years ago, we were needing to innovate on the business model. I wasn't happy with where things were at. I also had all of my stress came back due to some family health issues and some other business issues. It was like the most stress I'd been under ever. And surprise, surprise, even though I had gone on this whole journey around mental health and physical health and body composition and hormones and all these different things for functional medicine, my IBS was back in an instant. And so when I went to go get my products and do all my protocols, I was like, oh, still no one has solved the issue of digestive enzymes not working on a regular basis. Man, that's frustrating. Still no one's really innovated in the butyrate market. Why is that? And so it kind of just all came together, and I was like, that's it. We're switching to a supplement company, and I'm going to see if I can solve these issues for myself. I am selfish. I needed this for me. And yes, I do want to help others, and I do want to create products that people like me who have giant supplement graveyards, who have, back 15 years ago, I was putting $1,000 functional medicine protocols on my credit card. I didn't have the money. I was making like 30 grand a year when this whole thing started. And so I know what it's like to be the patient hoping that this next protocol is going to work, who's putting their lab tests on a credit card. And I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes that didn't end with success for me. So I have that experience when I'm feeling all hopeful. I've been on the practitioner side, and now I'm on the supplement sort of protocol side.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, your supplements, Healthy Gut Company, amazing. I love a lot of the different supports that you guys have within the company, and it's really great to see that, you were able to turn something that was your own digestive journey into an amazing company, into things that you were hoping that you wanted to see like in the market 10, 15 years ago when you were dealing with a lot of your issues. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to dive into histamine intolerance and what this can mean, because a lot of people are dealing with this. So what does histamine intolerance mean, and how can someone maybe start to identify, like through symptoms, that this might be something that they're dealing with?
Well, I think it's a bigger thing than even we know now. Like, I think if I had to guess, probably 30 to 50% of people with IBS have a histamine problem. Like, it's happening at the same time. And they blame some of their IBS stuff with histamine and vice versa. So the symptoms overlap, and we can talk more about why they overlap, because it's a lot because the architecture is kind of like peanut butter and jellied together. But there are the normal things, right? Like if you have a family history, like I did, I was on Claritin for years. Like I would sometimes when my inflammation, my gut was the worst, I would wake up with my eyes caked shut in seasonal allergy season. I had to put like water on them to like open them in the morning. I would have hives, but I didn't even know I was having hives. I was like, oh, look at this rash, or I'd have like very blotchy red skin certain days and I didn't know why. But I would take my Claritin because I knew my sinuses were swollen shut and my eyes were watery. And so that is, in my opinion, that grouping of histamine related symptoms is part of histamine intolerance. I think histamine or seasonal allergies is histamine intolerance. Like you're literally unable to relate to your environment in a regular way such that you express these symptoms of too much histamine. And then we rely on these drugs that they don't actually solve any of the problem. All they do is just block the histamine from entering our cells. So it's still circulating inside of us, causing probably more inflammation than we want it to. So that's the overt stuff. Like if you have reactions to food, other weird ones that people don't know about are car sickness or motion sickness, boat sickness. That's actually histamine intolerance. That's a really weird one that a lot of people struggle with that they don't know. Headaches, especially headaches before your cycle. If you're a woman, the week before your cycle, there's literature on that being related to histamine intolerance. Migraines are also linked. Again, a subset of migraines, not all migraines, but a subset can be triggered by histamine. Other odd ones are the pain and fibromyalgia, the lack of concentration and ADHD. These are all been studies actually where they've used a enzyme that breaks histamine down and actually seen positive results. And so that suggests that in all these very complex cases, there is a overproduction of histamine or an inability to break down the regular production of histamine. And so I think that's the most important thing for people to understand, is that histamine is not a bad guy. It's not like gluten or something, or it's not like seed oils or margarine or something. Like histamine in the right amount is absolutely critical for living and health. It's when we make too much histamine that we get this overflowing of symptoms that can go everywhere from you can't be in a car unless you're in the front seat of the car and you're like holding on for dear life so you don't puke, to every day is just kind of annoying and you're like cruddy and you can't figure it out, to, we have people in our community who can't eat strawberries, they can't eat fish, they can't eat normal foods that we would consider absolutely healthy foods. They have an inability to eat them without racing heart or just having to lay out on the couch. And so there's a wide spectrum here, but hopefully that gives people a idea of the map of the territory.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you mentioned that there is a spectrum and that also that histamine is not the bad guy, because it's involved in really important functions in our body, like the release of stomach acid, our sleep-wake cycle. And so, like you mentioned, we do need it in the right amounts. And so you keep mentioning how a lot of the symptoms can be widespread. So why is it that somebody might have symptoms that are located in different parts of their body? Like they could have gut issues, but they could also have the headaches that you're mentioning, or they could have the rashes that are showing up. So these symptoms are kind of all over the place and can make it really hard to identify, this might be a histamine issue. So why is it that the symptoms can be widespread?
Well, they're widespread because histamine, I don't know if there's an histamine receptor on every cell in the body, but I think there's histamine receptors in every system of the body. Is it every cell?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, system. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so histamine is literally needed, like you said, it's actually needed for stomach acid production. It's needed for pretty much everything. And so anytime you have these things like magnesium or vitamin D or butyrate or things that are like expressed on every system of the body, you're liable to have these weird cluster of symptoms. And then what that means to me is that you have someone with certain genetic and epigenetic and microbiome presentations in a certain direction, and then their histamine is like a brain thing, it's a migraine thing, it's a headache thing. Other people, it's like totally a skin related thing. Other people, it's a joint related thing. And so it's like when you have these global issues, then it comes down to your family history, it comes down to your current health status, and then that is going to be your pattern. And so I think we're learning a lot right now about neurodivergence, right, in the brain, and hopefully we're going to continue to learn about histamine presentations and how they can show up in various different forms just based on your current status as a person, basically.
Yeah, definitely. So what are then some of the most common causes, would you say, that you see of histamine intolerance?
Well, to me, it's an equation, right? We have histamine production on one side and we have histamine breakdown on the other side. It really is an equation where you want the two sides to equal zero at the end of the day. And I know algebra is not everybody's favorite topic. I tend to go back to it just because engineering, you end up doing way too much math. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what you're wanting from your body. You want to make a certain amount of histamine, and then you want to make enough histamine breakdown enzymes. And those are basically diamine oxidase, DAO, which is the main one in the gut. It has a little bit of potential systemic stuff. And then it's HNMT. HNMT. Trying to talk on the fly here. But that one's the systemic one that does less of the job of histamine breakdown. And so if the production, like let's say your genetics are right and your epigenetics right and your microbiome's right, the production of those two enzymes should equal about roughly the amount of histamine you make. But when people are having histamine intolerance, they are either making too much histamine for the amount of enzymes they can make to break it down or inactivate it, or they're not making enough of the ability to break it down. And usually that stems from DAO in the gut. And so you can do both too. You can be the complex cases, and those are the more complex cases. They have both a breakdown problem and a production problem. So on the production side, let's just talk about that side first. We are supposed to be able to relate to our environment, or the pollen. Like in histamine, most people are like have a mental model for pollen from trees and stuff like that. There's a lot of studies that actually suggest, especially in Japan, actually, you can go to your doctor and get a prescription for forest bathing. And I've read the studies on forest bathing, and they believe that some trees, especially like cedar trees, basically they give off the pollen, and inside the pollen is phytochemicals. Those phytochemicals hit us, we inhale them, we breathe them, and they trigger these different nervous system chemicals that downregulate us. They put us in parasympathetic, and they allow us to feel better. So in one part of the world, you're getting a prescription to inhale a lot of pollen in order to regulate your nervous system. And in another side of the world, you're getting a bunch of prescriptions to block the effects of pollen on your body, which is basically, your antihistamine classes. And so I think why I bring that up is that there should be the ability inside of a human to respond to the environment with some level of histamine, with some level of chemical response. That is normal and healthy for the body. When there's a mismatch, when the immune system is too vigilant, or when the nervous system is too vigilant and it sees that pollen or that dander as potentially an invader, it can do this inflammatory cascade that we then see and feel with all those symptoms we just talked about. And so that could be due to your mast cells being a little too reactive, which to me is oftentimes both a hypervigilance on the mast cells, but also they're like, mast cells, in my opinion, are kind of like if you put a bunch of bouncers in front of a club, they're going to naturally want to fight something. It's just kind of like what you see on social media, right? Like if they're too close to an inebriated population of people, there's likely something that's going to occur. If mast cells are not properly protected by mucus and they're not properly shielded from our food and from the environment, they're going to pick a fight and we lose that fight. And it's really not the mast cells' fault. It's just that maybe due to our hormones or due to our mucous membranes or something else, they're too close to what's happening inside of our body in relation to the environment. And then they just can't help themselves. They're just shooting histamine off left and right. So that's kind of on I usually blame sort of mucus production and a immune system that's a little too triggered, because there's a bunch of data that suggests if you don't grow up with pets, if you don't grow up on a farm, which most of us didn't, but if you don't grow up gardening and getting outside and playing outside, your immune system can just be kind of wired to react in a hypervigilant way. And we can come to some ideas later on how you can actually reverse that. But then on the DIO side, in the gut, if you have inflammation, DIO is a brush border enzyme. Brush border is the inside of your small intestine. There's all these really cool features of the small intestine that give you more surface area, and they have these little villi that look like hairs. And if those hairs get damaged, your brush border enzyme production goes down. And if you can't produce enough DIO, then even if your mast cells weren't at fault, even if you were in touch with cedar trees from Japan and the whole beautiful story went properly, if you don't make enough DIO due to inflammation or due to some sort of damage inside your gut, or a subset of people have bad genetics as far as their DIO production is down. I think the latest numbers I saw on that is approximately 15% of folks may have some genetic SNPs that have lower DIO production. You could fall into that camp where you're constantly behind the eight ball, having to produce DIO at levels that you might have a trouble sustaining on a regular basis. And so either one of those situations on the production side or the breakdown side cause that equation to not zero out every day. And if it zeroes out on the plus side, you're going to feel it. And where you feel it will be dependent on what we talked about earlier as far as your genetics, epigenetics, your microbiome, all those different things.
Yeah. Oh, that was an amazing breakdown of histamine intolerance and like why that can be an issue with people. So I love that you touched on the mast cell piece, because that was something I wanted to bring into the chat today. So I know that within your courses and with what you talk a lot about is that we used to think a lot about our gut is just like this one layer that if we break it, there's that increased intestinal permeability, right? Then we're, absorbing more toxins, things like that. So there's those supports that are out there to help repair the leaky gut, right? But there's more to our gut than just that one layer that we're trying to resolve. And that can be a big reason why when people do leaky gut protocols and things like that, they might not really be seeing a lot of benefit from that piece, right? And so where you're kind of going at here is you mentioned two different things: DAO production, which is in the brush border and the intestines, and then also the immune system aspect, both of which are different layers in the gut. So can we kind of like briefly dive into some of the different layers and how ultimately when we're getting to that mast cell component, I mean, that's kind of that immune system, that deep and final layer. So how these different layers affected can be leading to that increased intestinal permeability, maybe setting us up for that histamine intolerance that you've been talking about.
Yeah. I mean, if you were like, hey, let's have a few drinks and let's talk about this, I would say, uh, if you're experiencing histamine intolerance, your gut is already broken down to a solid amount. Like you're in a place where like you shouldn't question whether or not you have gut damage. You should be questioning, who do I need to work with? What tests do I need to do? What kind of protocols do I need to do to fix this? Because I don't take Claritin anymore. I don't have any seasonal allergies anymore. I don't experience those types of things. It turns out I do have something going on with my DAO production, and so I'm better because I have ADHD. I consume way less caffeine in the afternoons if I'm taking Histaharmony and some other products. And so what I want to just say is that as you heal your gut, these symptoms do go away. Um, and I think part of the reason why I was kind of saying the mast cells are like your bouncers is, yeah, according to the research that I've seen, there's these 5 layers of the gut. And in the ideal world, in the healthy world, that's like ideal. Again, ideal meaning we maybe never reach there, but we get close to it. The mast cells are part of the layer of the gut that's actually 1 cell thick, and they're like these specialized cells. But in between them and your food, or them and your microbiome, or them and a toxin, or something, some piece of pollen, or something, there's a lot going on. There's 2 layers of mucus. There's a very kind of thin layer of mucus that almost has nothing in it. It's just like pure mucus. There's another layer, thicker mucus, that's got bacteria and all kinds of probably viruses and fungi and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. There's all these chemicals from your body that are protecting you. Some people have heard of things like secretory IgA because it's been on one of their functional medicine tests. There's all kinds of really cool stuff that we could go into maybe on a different show, but your body's secreting chemicals to prune the microbiome, to protect it. And then you have a oxygen barrier that's kind of trying to keep everything at a certain level of growth and a certain type of growth in there. And so in general, the mast cells should see very filtered options, basically. And if that starts to get patchy, if the gut starts to break down, you start to lose your oxygen, your immune system starts to either get a little tired or maybe a little overactive, your mucous membranes start to thin out or get patchy, your microbiome starts to get patchy or made up of the wrong types of bugs, you basically start to just compress all these layers, and next thing you know, the mast cells are a little too close to everything that's happening. And then again, it's kind of, I don't know that's really their fault. They're just like there, and part of what they do is they just react to what's coming at them. And I'm not suggesting that they're like some sort of like dumb cell or anything like that. They're very sophisticated. It's just that in general, that's their job in the immune system cascade, is to be responsive to what's happening. And so beyond that layer of cells, you have this complex immune system, and the immune system uses a lot of signals. There's a lot of just like, I don't know, there's like a chatty group of text messages, man. They're just sending off these cytokine text messages about everything that's happening, both anti-inflammatory and pro-inflammatory. And so if you're in a situation where, let's say life is stressful, my life is stressful, I don't know that many people who don't have stressful lives. If you're someone who's kind of circadian mismatched, meaning you spend a lot of your time indoors, you don't get much sunlight in your eyes. Let's say it's also just hard for you to eat like regular food. And by regular food, I mean like local, wherever you're at in the world, kind of real food. those are the characteristics of someone who's capable of having measured mast cell response, of having good gut health. But it's very easy in this internet world that I am grateful for, but also is kind of mismatched to our biology. It's super easy to be in a position where you're accidentally kind of damaging your own brush border, when you're kind of compromising your gut health and you don't even know it. And so that would be why I think seasonal allergies are on the rise. These different types of histamine intolerances are on the rise, even though everybody's aware of probiotics now. Like that was not the thing. That was not the case 10 years ago. No, barely anybody knew what probiotics were. Now people do know what leaky gut is. That was not the case even 5 years ago. And so we know more about gut health. I would say we're taking more gut health supplements probably than ever as a society. And yet I don't think gut health is getting any better. And I think histamine symptoms are getting worse.
Mm-hmm. So talking then about, because I want to talk about some supports then that people can think about for supporting histamine intolerance. So maybe we can start with DAO. So do you like DAO supplementation? I know you mentioned Histaharmony, which is one of your products, great product. And then another one is like even like nutrients that can help to support DAO production. So do you find these supports like useful at some point along somebody's like histamine intolerance journey when they're going through this?
I hadn't in the past. So I haven't publicly talked about DIO for a long time, even though I knew about it, because my experience had been that the products in the market weren't working reliably enough for individuals. And there's a lot of things out there, right? There's some legume vegetarian DIO products. There's some beef kidney, like rather than taking the DAO extract, you just take like the kidney part of the animal. And I hadn't seen those things clinically have success or with myself personally, so I hadn't been talking about them. I did run into some people 3 years ago from Spain, some scientists who had been working really hard to create a different type of extraction method and a different way to protect it, like an enteric coating. And so this new class of DAO products, we're not the only company to have them, but what you are looking for is an enteric coated DAO product. I have seen, not only do they have studies on ADHD, fibromyalgia, things like that, headaches, but I've personally seen them matter for myself and my family. And so I do think that there's a lot of veterans of like warriors who've been trying to get their health back for a lot of years, like you and I, frankly, that we've been at this for a little bit. And I think maybe they've tried some DIO products 5 years ago or 7 years ago, or even 3 years ago. And they're like, man, those things don't work. So I think there's a lot of experts and a lot of doctors out there who tried the first several generations of DIO products, didn't see results. And so they're very anti-DIO supplementation now. But I do believe we have seen a breakthrough. I didn't do it. It's a awesome scientist in Spain. We were just able to get it here and package it in a way that made sense. But they do give a level of results that, frankly, I would love to hear your point of view. I don't see it from like quercetin. I don't see it from like some of the mast cell stabilizers that I want to. I wish it was like, I just wish I had a product that like turned off the symptoms as good as these new class of DIO supplements do, but I don't really have one. Do you have one?
Well, first, actually, what I want to say is I really love how you mentioned that with you weren't finding a lot of good effects with a lot of the DAOs on the market, because I had the exact same experience when I was, even for myself actually years ago when I was trying to use DAO to help with my histamine intolerance. I actually felt worse. Honestly, I actually kind of felt a little nauseous. I don't know if it was something in the supplementation, but I don't know. It didn't sit well with me, but I haven't been using it for years, honestly. I actually will accept, shout out to your company. I love Histaharmony. So I use Histaharmony. It's the only DAO I use. But in a lot of my mast cell activation syndrome clients, I have not used DIO at all to help support their mast cells up until Histaharmony, just because I didn't see any effect. I felt like it wasn't doing anything. They're kind of expensive supplements, and I felt like it was just a wash. But the funny thing is when I'd have clients come to me, and then maybe they still had another functional doctor or someone they were working with on the side, they'd always say to them, you need to be on DAO. Like, this is what you need to be on to support. And I was like, I'm telling you, I haven't seen it help. So I wanted to mention that piece with so are you asking about mast cell stabilization, like some supports to help with like quercetin? Is that what you're talking about? Like ones that I have found to be really helpful?
Yeah, I was going in that direction, but then I just remembered that you'd also mentioned about potential nutrients for DIO production in and of itself.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I definitely want to circle back to that. So yeah, I have found that quercetin, resveratrol, I have found more like bioflavonoids, like polyphenols, like luteolin and rutin, like to be pretty helpful in certain people, but not in everybody. So that's the thing. I have found like it takes time figuring out what's like that perfect, set of supports that somebody might need. And I don't think they need to be on every single, mast cell stabilizer under the sun, like, on 10 different ones. But I have found that circling through like a few of them seem to be really helpful. But in terms of, again, stabilization, I really find that addressing nervous system and addressing the environment, addressing like how much we're intaking, like you've been mentioning before, it's like there's that gut piece, but then there's like, we also are intaking stuff that's affecting that histamine level. And so addressing that while we start to work on the gut seems to be a better solution that I have actually found in supporting people. But yeah, I think it's just, again, it's kind of individualized. But anyways, I'll let you go ahead with the nutrients.
No, I love that. Well, I mean, I think I would actually say the nutrient to go after is your nervous system. And especially I notice it in my own self. Like I don't have histamine intolerant symptoms. I eat cheese all the time. I have leftovers all the time. But if I start getting super stressed, if I'm traveling plus stress, and then I start, having a little cheese or something like that, a little something that's higher in histamine, I will get the sneezes. I will start to get a little stuffy. But it has to be after my nervous system has taken a beat down. Like over the holidays, it happened of like, no duh, right? The most stressful time of the year. And so I found very similarly, yes, I think histoharmony is super powerful and works when other things don't. But if you don't have access to that right now, I know we're gonna have a coupon code and all that cool stuff, but if you don't even want to try that right now, doing any practices to increase your parasympathetic tone, increase your HRV, or if you're tracking that, just hugging yourself and just remembering that everything is okay and you're okay right now is like probably the best nutrient that I can think of to reduce those histamine things.
Okay. I am so glad this conversation took a turn to this because I didn't even have on my agenda that I want to talk about nervous system. But now that we brought it up, yes, it is the best nutrient. It really is. Like I have found that for myself actually, but also for my clients that stick with doing nervous system work, I swear it's like half of the healing process. It really is, like probably more, because it just gets your body into that ready to heal state. And it's just not feeling like those bouncers outside of the club that wants to just fight everything, like you mentioned, which is a great analogy. And I'm going to start using that with my clients. But yeah, nervous system work is so important. And it's just like, yeah, there's no supplement that can beat nervous system work. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm personally not familiar with any specific nutrient that boosts DIO production itself. To me, I think of it more as what are the requirements needed for DIO production in the first place, and like what would the conditions need to be inside the body to create the proper amount of DIO. And so to me, that would be a really healthy small intestine. If you have a healthy small intestine with an intact brush border, you should be able to make the DIO you need, unless you happen to have like some really poor genetics, and those are kind of keeping you down. And so, to me, anything you can do to foster better small intestinal health, and that usually looks like, to me, better stomach acid support and better digestive enzyme support, is going to set up the conditions to avoid things like SIBO or SIFO or different small intestinal issues that crop up over time when you start to have inflammation, gut problems, histamine problems, and like, I mean, once that cascade kicks off, the chances of you ending up with like a SIBO diagnosis or something like that just go through the roof. And so anything you can do upstream of the small intestine, that includes say your prayers or don't say prayers, just say gratitude, or just don't even do any of that. Just breathe a few breaths before you start eating. Try to chew your food like at least 5 times before you swallow it. Like if you just try to optimize the things above the small intestine, it actually really does make a meaningful help to the small intestine's health. And then that'll make, I think, a meaningful boost to the DIO over time.
So I would like to dive into chronic mold exposure. Do you find that this plays a role in leaky your gut? Can that create, again, we've talked a lot about toxins and different things like that, so I'm assuming what your answer is, but I would just like to dive into what your feedback is and what your thoughts are on mold as being a potential issue for creating that increased intestinal permeability.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of the equation. I think mold is kind of having its day right now, and sometimes people get mad at me for for my points of view, but you got to remember that I started this in listservs on Yahoo back in the day, trying to figure out how to handle my health. Amazon was kind of barely becoming a thing back then to like get books delivered to my house, and so back in 2009 and 2010. Guess what was like the biggest thing in the whole world for diet? It was oxalates and salicylates. Everybody was oxalate free and salicylate free, and it was like this huge deal. And my point being is that there's these waves in natural health that come and go as different generations of doctors and experts get the microphone. And mold is having its day right now, and I think it's really important. But just like people start to villain or cause histamine to become a villain or mast cells to become the villain, I think a lot of people can get over-indexed on mold and mycotoxins. They are 100% a problem for a large percentage of people who have chronic health issues. And the majority of the human population can deal with some acute exposure to mold without any lasting issues. Like mold was here before us, it'll be here after us. It's everywhere. You cannot be in a bubble without it. Like I've watched friends, I've gone down the rabbit holes myself in my own houses. I didn't go this far, but I've had friends literally throw out every possession they've had trying to become mold free. And I can tell you that this has happened more than 3 times. They moved houses, they threw away all their possessions, they went through detox protocols, and they were still the same level of, I would call it fragile health and lack of resilience 2 to 3 years later. And so there's a yes and here, which is like mold matters, mycotoxins matter. I'm a believer in getting the lab testing done to see what you have going on inside your body. I'm a believer that if you have some in your body, you should plan to detox that. But I am not a believer that you need to just get rid of everything in your house, that you have to act like you can't go anywhere without being in a bubble and avoiding mold, because I haven't seen that produce the outcomes people want, which I think people want to be healthy. They want to have energy. They want to be resilient. They want to do the things they love to do. They want to be the moms and dads they want to be. And just working on elimination, just working on detox doesn't necessarily achieve that, in my opinion. And so I think going down the mold rabbit hole is great. If you have a leaky pipe in your house right now, if there's a bunch of mold in your dishwasher, you should get that remediated. You should get that handled. But if you've already kind of gone down that rabbit hole, you've already done some mild mold detoxification, I think you should really start to shift your focus to maybe more gut healing in general, or resilience building. Like probably hormones or gut is probably what's a bigger issue for those folks. And again, people might fry me in the comments who are literally like, they are on the couch right now. They have mold, like acute mold exposure. And I'm not talking to those individuals. They know who they are and they have their own path to get, back on their feet. But I think a large percentage of people, they want to find a villain. And I get it, because I've done it myself a lot. Like at first it was H. pylori, and then it was like this other thing, and then it was this thing. And the functional medicine rabbit hole it's sort of like a false prophet in a way, because what happens when you get to the bottom and you find out it was your nervous system all the time, this whole time? That if you just spend a little bit more time with your nervous system, going to therapy, dealing with your traumas, dealing with your emotions or your neurodivergent wiring or whatever it is that you have, I have those things. I would have been so much more resilient to the things of life, which the things of life are Wi-Fi, the things of life are blue light, the things of life are mold. And so to me, it's a yes and. Get checked, do the right binders. If you can, check your home. Do not have an active mold growth going on in your home. Get a high quality air filter like Jasper. Like, take care of the basics. But then after that, focus on what matters more, making a gut more resilient, making your hormones more resilient, making your nervous system more resilient.
Yeah, it's like that rebuilding phase, right? That's so important. It's like you could do all the SIBO protocols or mold protocols in the world, but if you're not actually, like, you're binding, you're killing things off, but if you're not actually rebuilding after or during, right, then what are you left with, right? We're just at a protocol or a 2 or 3, and as though they're great and they can be helpful, you know, sometimes it's what's needed to get that last 20 or 30% better, and to also help as well, because I find a lot too, and I know this is what you've been like alluding to, but when we have those weak barriers in our body, like our weak gut or other barriers, right? That's what makes us also like more susceptible to. So again, shifting the focus, like you're saying, to supporting the gut or supporting the nervous system, which is interacted with every single barrier and part of our body, right? That needs addressing, is really important. So,
yeah, and I think you said it there really correctly, and I hope that's where we're moving to as a alternative health industry or integrative medical industry, which is that we're never doing one thing at once. We're not just killing, we're not just detoxing, we're supporting the whole organism at the same time. Very aware that if we detox with too many products at one time, we're actually going to potentially put that person in a deeper hole than if we would have went a little lighter and supported with a bunch of gut stuff, or like you said, other barrier stuff. Like, the amount of women that should be on BHRT is pretty much like every woman over, 38 maybe. Like, you should start really considering it at that age. And people don't want to talk about that yet, but it's really true that if your estrogen and progesterone are shot, your mucous membranes are going to be shot, your barrier defense is going to be shot, and you could be struggling with SIBO and mold and all these different things you want to blame for a long, long time. But if you had done something like maybe some BHRT or some really foundational gut support on a daily basis, I'm not talking about like a killing protocol, but just like breaking down your foods basis, then everything else you would do after that, it's like a multiplication. It's not, you're not digging yourself into a hole. It's going to make everything much easier to overcome in the future.
yes, definitely, definitely. Well, one of the last questions that I have for you then is just, what are some tests or supports that people can look to, for example, maybe for like either identifying histamine intolerance, or even just going a little bit deeper and talking about like testing that people can do looking for that leakier gut? Because I know that's a big popular test now, is getting a lot of those gut microbiome tests done and looking at the zonulin markers. But I know you've chatted a lot about looking a little bit deeper than that to identify if that's an issue and what we need supporting. So I'd love for you to kind of dive a little bit into that piece for people.
Yeah. So I'm a engineer. I love numbers. I love tests, but they can become extraordinarily expensive and really, really frustrating when you start to like go under the hood, or if you're like a practitioner like yourself and you start to see like 20 tests in a row from the same company with the same sort of symptomology, and you're starting to see these patterns. You're like, what is going on here? That was like the most frustrating thing. One of the most frustrating things for me when we had our practice was I saw a stool test on like 350 people in a row in like 18 months. And the symptoms ended up being just as important indicator of health as the testing did. And so test, yes, but check and be brutally honest about your symptoms. Try not to fool yourself. It's very easy to fool ourselves. But, part of, I think, why working with a practitioner is really helpful is because you actually have to report out and be like, yeah, I'm not feeling as good as I wanted to feel. Or yeah, my skin's not really where I want it to be, or my gut, yeah, you're right. If I was really going to score my poops, they're not as good as I'd hope they'd be. And it's really hard to admit that to ourselves, but it's much easier to admit it to another person. And so um, there are, a lot of companies pushing zonulin markers. The research on zonulin as a marker for leaky gut is, I would say, inconclusive to not a reliable marker of leaky gut. The lactulose mannitol test is still the gold standard, but there is some fallibility in that test. So if you wanted to do it and you're like, I want the data, I would probably do the lactulose mannitol. I would also maybe save your money to do some stool testing and do two stool tests from two different companies at the same time. Um, because if you do have a latent stool, some sort of infection, it could be a worm, a parasite, it could be some sort of bacterial infection, like that will be an issue that you're going to have to deal with. And so you can't really get that from symptoms. You can just be like, hey, my IBS isn't getting better, or my stools aren't where I want it, or my food sensitivities aren't going away. But I would skip the food sensitivity testing. You can do that through journaling and symptom tracking. As far as histamine testing goes, there's not like a reliable panel yet that I'm aware of that you can just send people to that they can do. To me, it's much more about symptoms at this moment in time. There's some progress, right? There's progress in being able to actually like run your blood serum levels and see histamine. We just and even check DAO and things like this, but we just have so little data about what's healthy and how many data points do you need to understand what to do with that data. That's like where people don't like just regular patients and customers don't get, is that oftentimes you need 2 or 3 lab tests in a row to even know what is someone's baseline. And so where histamine testing is at the moment, I don't think it's a great use of your money. I think it's much better to track histamine symptoms, your sneezing, all these different things, headaches to skin reactions to especially cycle, like timing this around your cycle. When do these symptoms show up? That is worth so much, not only to yourself, but if you are working with a functional medicine provider, having that kind of data for them, that's something AI cannot yet do, is to have that matrix as a practitioner where you see people over and over and over again with these similar symptomology. You can start to just see patterns. You're like, ping, 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 about what's happening for these individuals. So I would say start there. If you're going to invest the money in something, I think screening for the big things like anemia and like real medical issues are really worth it. And then actually screening for like GI infections are totally worth it. I would save my money when it comes to like food sensitivities or histamine specific stuff or leaky gut specific stuff, just because you can track that. Can you eat the foods you want to eat? If you can't, then you got something going on. Is it leaky gut, or is it enzymes, or is it something else? No one knows, but also the test won't tell you either.
This is a great note to end on, because so before I work with any client, I always tell them I'm pretty conservative on testing. I'll probably be the one person you work with that doesn't decide to order like 5 to 8 tests for you just to like see what we can gather from all these different lab values of gut microbiome testing and whatever else is out there, just because using symptoms as a way to track is one of the most important things. And again, I'm not anti-test. I actually love using different tests when indicated. Like if I'm suspecting mold issues, I'm going to run a mycotoxin urine panel. Absolutely. Right. Things like that. So, but I sometimes even dread doing the retest just because I'll see in their, I have a lot of my clients before I meet with them fill out a little report just to see like where their symptoms are at, and I'll check it and they're doing so much better. And sometimes when we have a follow-up testing coming, sometimes, the test might still show things are left in the system. Let's talk about mycotoxins, for example. But they're feeling so much better. And the test can really just trigger negative emotions and then kind of create this negative feedback loop, and someone can spiral from that. So I actually tell people, please don't look at the test until we talk, because I find that it's so important to just, if you're feeling better, like you said, you can tolerate more foods, you can go outside and you don't have allergies, or, you have more energy to go exercise, like those, you're sleeping better. Like that to me is 1,000 times more important than any test you can run. And of course the tests are important because ultimately we do want to get toxins out of our system and want to do all that stuff. But I think a lot of it does get really overhyped in the functional world, or in any world really, when it comes to testing and just focusing solely on numbers. But I find that to be so important to really focus in on the symptoms. So thank you for saying that. That and nervous system work. I'm so happy that we talked about those today because that's so important.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. I didn't even know we were going to vibe on that, but I'm glad we are. And yeah, it's. I think the other thing is that even you and I, who've seen a lot of lab data on ourselves, but also on a lot of other bodies, like literally accumulated number of tests and symptom presentations and stories, I find the same thing. I'm still valuable. So I've been tracking my sleep with various sleep trackers since 2013. Back when they used to have to wear like headbands to bed and all kinds of weird stuff. Those companies went out of business. They didn't make it. It wasn't comfortable. But what I found, even with the latest technologies, is that I have a rule. I don't check my sleep data until after noon. And the reason why is that I can wake up and be like, wow, I think I slept pretty good last night. Like I am actually full of energy. In my world, I'm pretty good today. Like this is like a 6 or 7 out of 10 day. Like this is, it's not like I'm not like 9 out of 10, but those are pretty rare. This is pretty good. If I were to check my sleep data, which is what I started to realize, I would check my sleep and be like, oh, how many cycles did I get? Or how much deep sleep did I get? Or like, what did I do right that gave me this feeling? And I would look at it and it would be like the worst score in the last 2 weeks. And I'd be like, oh no, what is happening? And it would ruin my whole day. It would literally, because I'd be looping on it. I'd be like, what did I do wrong yesterday? And it would totally take me out of the state that I was in, which was this happy, grateful state, energetic state. And then some days I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I need so much coffee. I'm going to break every rule in the book today. I'm going to take so many nootropics, uppers, whatever, just to get through this day. And I'll look at my sleep data and be like, you killed it last night. Like best score in the last month. And I'm like, how does this make sense? And so that's where just a real world example of how like data isn't always helpful for our experience as humans. And also contextually speaking, when you consume those reports, like when you said, like, don't look at this data until we talk or until we do it live, it really matters because it's so easy for us to internalize whatever story we have about this data before someone else with maybe a better context for that data can help us like internalize the story about it.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. It's amazing how quickly your emotions or your energy can just shift at like the drop of a hat from like seeing how you just what you're feeling, but then you seeing lab values or you seeing numbers and things like that. It's just your body can switch immediately. Your nervous system, sympathetic driven, and your body's just like not feeling good after that. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that piece and gave a real world example too. And I have plenty of those myself. I'm not perfect. I definitely will be feeling good and I see something listed on a lab value or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, like what happened? So yeah, happens to the best of us. But this was such a gratifying conversation. I'm so grateful for it and for being able to have the chance to chat with you. And I'd love to just leave the floor open to you for any last minute words of wisdom or where people can find you or your products and things like that. Just so if people want to get in touch with you and your courses as well, I know you have a lot of offerings, so I'll let you go ahead and explain some of them.
Yeah, just on the Healthy Gut website, and I think we have a special link. Is it healthygut.com/peacock? Is that the link?
Stephanie Peacock.
Okay, Stephanie Peacock.
I just had to think about that. Yeah, thank you.
So if you use that link, it would be awesome because Stephanie gets a little bit of a commission to help support her and the show and her clinic. So, and then you also get a coupon to use on our products. Like I said, I have been that person without any money to spend on products, but needing them very much. So I really wanted to build a brand that we do offer discounts for first-time subscribers, but we are first-time buyers. But also we offer free health coaching if you're confused, if you don't know which product to start with, if you're confused about dosing. I mean, that's one thing we didn't touch on too much today, but like HistaHarmony, for instance, some people will write in and be like, dude, this is just another DIO, and all they did was read the back of the box, which the back of the box says, like, I think it says 1 to 2 per day or something like that, because that's the lowest dose in studies that provided some signal of benefit. But some people, depending on how much histamine they're producing or how bad their their place in their health is, they might need 4 or 6 a day to really get that immediate benefit that we've been talking about. And so dose really matters. The back of supplement labels is really for the FDA. It's not really for us as humans. And so, yeah, check out healthygut.com/Stephanie Peacock. Use the coupon code. Reach out to our support. Everybody on our team that's going to be answering the phone is US based. They have nutritionist certifications, health coaching certifications. They have functional diagnostic certifications. They have herbalist certifications. Like, there's a lot of awesome. There's PhDs, almost 2 PhDs on the team now. So when you pick up the phone or when you call in to us, we're here to really try to help you and help you pick out the right product. And I guess my last thing would just be like, yeah, if you're dealing with these histamine issues, just know that there is a new class of products out there with HistaHarmony that are doing things that have not been done before. And I hope you'll give it another chance. If they don't work for you, we have our 60-day money-back policy, and we can support you if it doesn't work out. But I would ask people, like, it's helped a lot of folks. It's been much more impactful than I thought it was going to be, and I'm just hoping we can get the word out to get more people to try it again.
Definitely. I love that. Well, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for being a guest. I know people are going to love this episode.
Thank you.